Look at you. Okay, so welcome everyone, and let's welcome back Dr. Barr, who is going to talk about time management and note taking. Take it away.
Applause. Okay, so have any of you been through the time management one before? No. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to be talking about today are really it's the two most popular seminars that I do for students who want to be successful but are not quite sure how do I do this. So the first one to talk about is time management. It's one of the things we are famous for is telling our students, you need to learn how to manage your time. I don't even know what that is. And so I want to teach you what time management is, and then how you're going to apply that. And this is for academic success. This might look different if it's for in a different venue, right? Like in your professional life or something, but for academic success. Then the next thing that I'm going to talk about is sort of a condensed version of one on listening in class and then note-taking. And really what we're going to focus on is the note-taking part of it, because I find that's kind of a lost skill, and students a lot of times don't understand what is the purpose of taking notes, why am I doing this? Can't you just give me everything? So, and that's kind of where we're headed. So at any time, you guys, this is informal. If you have a question, just ask it. You don't have to raise your hand or anything like that. All right, so time management for academic success. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is on the very first page there, you have a little survey called How Well Do You Plan, or How Well Do I Plan? So if you could just circle those numbers and then add them up, we'll see where y'all are at. And if you add them up, the interpretation is on the back side of that. All right, so I'm not going to ask each of you where you're at, but are you all sort of toward the middle? Average, give or take one? Okay, is that where we're at? Okay, that's perfect, actually, because who I have the most difficult time with are the people who are the terrible planners or the excellent planners. We're out on the continuum. The problem with terrible planners is they're just terrible planners. And even if they plan, they usually don't follow through, which still doesn't make you good at time management. Now it makes you a good planner who doesn't follow the plan. Down here, people who plan every second of their day are huge candidates for burnout. So it's actually good if you're closer toward the middle, right? Because these are the folks that I find are really receptive to these, to this plan and how to use it. Okay, so first of all, what is time management? Time management is not just planning, it's planning followed by execution. If you don't execute, you're a good planner, but you're not good at time management, right? You've got to make your plan and you've got to follow it. And so I think a really common question is, do I really have to do that to be successful? And the answer is yes, you absolutely do. That studying doesn't just happen. And how many times have you said, well, it'll happen, I'll get it done. And then, oh my gosh, here we are Monday morning, oops. So studying doesn't just happen. It is so much more likely to happen if you actually plan for it. And this is the thing we know. You guys, this stuff I'm telling you, this is not stuff that I hope is true because I'm giving a seminar on time management. This is based on research on a lot of college students. And here's what we know, is that time managers in college, they know why they're here, they know what they want to do. And we also know that those kids who do that, they keep schedules, right? There is a clear line between doing this and success. Okay, so in terms of time management, it's not a lot of things you have to know, it's a couple of things you have to do. Right? And there are 3 tools that you're going to use, and it's not which one do I use. The idea, you guys, is you use all 3 of these. Okay? And what I always tell students at this point is that I spent a very miserable freshman year in college, doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing, going to class, not reading, not studying, until there was an exam, and then I'd pull the all-nighter, maybe a couple of, I don't know, right? And then I'd be mad that I only got a C. And in reality, I should have been really grateful that I at least was passing the classes. But after my freshman year, and I was absolutely miserable, I feel like I hadn't really learned a thing. I had barely squeaked by on exams, but I thought this is not probably how you're supposed to do it. So I just started gradually kind of making changes. And by the end of my sophomore year, I was doing all of these things, right? And I wasn't really thinking about it. I was just figuring out, like, how come I'm forgetting to do this? Why isn't this getting done? And so I just gradually kind of started doing all of these things and have been doing so ever since. And then when I started researching time management, I figured out, well, I was actually reasonably, I mean, it wasn't perfect, but I at least got the right idea. But what I want to tell you is that once I started doing these things and really planning and then executing the plan, my academic experience was completely different because I went to class actually having review of what we talked about the day before. If I was supposed to read something ahead, I'd actually done it or at least tried to do it. And then instead of sitting there, you know, with words just kind of swirling around your head, like, what are you talking about? Like all of a sudden I was engaged in the lecture and asking questions, right? And the thing is, I'm not that smart. I'd be really diligent about what you're doing. So what I want to do is share with you these 3 things. Okay, so if you turn in your notes, you're going to find what's called a term calendar. And what that is, go a couple of pages. You go. There you go. It starts in July. Okay, so here's the first thing you do. Oh, by the way, I left the website on there. It's called Calendarpedia. And you can get every kind of calendar for anything in any different form that you want. They're all downloadable for free. So, and honestly, I just went on there really quick and clicked these months and printed it out. But you can get daily calendars, weekly calendars, you know, annual calendars. So all of it for free. Okay, so the first thing with the term calendar, here's what you do. Now remember, this is for academics. So you sit down with all of your syllabi when you get them next week, or if you already have some, that's great. And what you're going to do is write down every major academic something, which is I've got an exam, this date. I've got a quiz, this date. I've got a paper due, this date. It's the major things. It's not the day-to-day stuff. It is just, in this term, what are my major things? The other thing, too, is I'm going to tell you is that if you've got like a term project or paper that's due at the end, a really good idea is give yourself break it up along the way, right? If you think about a term paper in its totality, it's kind of daunting. But if you think, okay, in the first month of school, I'm going to at least pick my topic. And then in the second month of school, I'm going to do, maybe you've got a literature review to do, and you're going to start working on that. But break it up into sections. Make sense? If you sit down and think, I'm going to write my whole paper right now, you might. It's not going to be very good paper. So break it up. And honestly, this is what I tell my graduate students who have to write a thesis. It's what I tell doctoral students who have to write a dissertation. If you think about the whole thing, you're going to go crazy. Break it up into pieces. And so put those dates on there as well. What you don't want to do is put a lot of personal things on there, but if you've got a major personal event that you know is going to have an impact on your school, you might want to put that on there. Like if you're getting married, you have an exam the following Monday, right? So not a ton, but if there's something major personal stuff on there. The other thing that's important to do with this, wherever it is that you study routinely, put this up there so you see it all the time. So every time you sit down, you know what's coming up next week or the week after or whatever, but always have it right there. You never want to be surprised by this stuff. All right, are we good on that so far? Okay, so the next thing is the weekly schedule, and this is where I talk about let the little things add up. Okay, this is where, if you turn to the next one, I've got a copy of a weekly schedule in there for you. Keep going. Okay. There you go. And then the page before that, can I see this for 1 second? See this right here, you guys? See where it says make a schedule based on your needs? These are guidelines for how to do a weekly schedule. You don't have to use them all. Use what works for you. Okay, but these are some really good guidelines, so we're going to talk about that. Okay, so on a weekly schedule, what let the little things add up means, I talk about this in terms of studying, because one of the things I hear, like, my students will say, oh, I didn't have time to study. It's like, well, what do you mean you didn't have time? And when we start talking about it, they didn't recognize that they had a lot of little chunks of time. And the thing is, you guys, you don't have to sit down and study for 2 or 3 hours. That's not a rule. You can study for 30 minutes, right? And the big thing to do is get out of thinking, I got to study everything. It's, you know, wherever you're at, right? Study that. You do not have to go through everything. In fact, believe it or not, most teachers, when I say most, because it might not be all, there's actually a sequence to our courses, right? There's what we think is hopefully a logical sort of scaffolding of the newer stuff on the old stuff, and then we keep, you know, kind of all, but it all plays back, and there actually should be a logical presentation to the stuff in your classes. So, like with my students, I tell them, you know what, don't sit down and try to learn all this. This is ridiculous. Sit down and just get this. And then once you've got that, then move on to the next thing. And your brain actually, you know, think of your brain like any other muscle in your body. When you learn, it's because the brain has actually changed. And it takes time for those changes to occur, right? Like how many of you, if you said, wow, I'm really out of shape, i.e., I don't know what this class is about, and I got an exam coming up. Hey, how many of you to get in shape would go to the gym and just go, well, I'm just going to work out for the next 48 hours straight through. That ought to do it. You know that's not going to work, right? You're going to be completely torn out because you're not allowing the body to change, right? You work out some, there's time, and then after time is when you see the change. It's the same with your brain. When you sit down and you go, I'm going to study for 24 hours, you might get through that exam, but like a day later, gone. Because you actually didn't really learn the material, okay? So kind of a key thing to this is you want to start studying earlier rather than later. That gives you time. But the other thing is, think about a gym workout. Could you go into the gym, work out really hard for 30 minutes and come out better for it? You could. You could go if you pushed really hard for 30 minutes. If you lifted for 30 minutes, you did a really focused, concentrated workout, that's every bit as good as doing a 2-hour, not so focused, not so concentrated workout. Does that kind of make sense? And so, you know, if you think about it, like, what if you did a half hour here, and a half hour here, and a half hour here, maybe an hour here? In one day, 2.5 hours of studying, and it's just kind of interspersed, right? That's what I'm talking about, let the little things add up. And you guys are telling you this, right? I was a full-time student and a full-time employee from the time I was a junior in high school, all the way through my master's degree as well as my doctorate degree. I know how hard it is. I do. And I tell you, the way I survived was by letting the little things add up, by figuring it out. And here, honestly, just put my head down, do what I got to do for 16 weeks. It's not your whole life. It's 16 weeks, and then you're done. And then you go crazy for a while, and then you come back and you do 16 weeks, right? If that was my whole life, that would suck. But it's not your whole life, right? But because I did that, my whole life is now the life that I wanted. So it is totally worth it. Okay, so I'm going to go down that list of how to make a needs-based schedule and kind of weigh in on some of these. But here's what you're going to do on your weekly schedule. And you guys, the reason I think this is so important to do is you will start to see where you have those 30-minute blocks or 45-minute blocks or hour blocks. Once you actually see them, you go, oh, they're harder to waste when you now know, like, shoot, you totally wasted my time. Okay, so what you would do is record your class times, your lab times. Also too, if you have, like me, I have a pretty good commute to campus. I would record that out of there too, like block it out. If you're recording stuff where you can't study, okay? So you're gonna record your class times, your lab times, commute times if it's important. Okay, now number 2, record meal times. I don't know. I'll eat when I'm hungry and I have a break. But for me to record meal time is stupid. That's never gonna happen. But if you live that kind of life, go for it. Okay. If you have regularly scheduled personal activities, such as meetings, or if you have a set work schedule or whatever, I would say week to week, if you're a student, you probably don't have anything that's regular. So do a new schedule every week, right? Most of you have jobs, your schedule changes all the time, or you have jobs. You're just hanging out. Good for you.
I used to.
Okay.
Then I quit.
Well, that's always good.
Okay.
Well, you go the rest of your life to work. But so yeah, it just kind of depends. You know, lots of students have jobs that fluctuate all the time. But all right. If you have any special activities you need or want to do on a regular basis, like if you, I don't know, if you go to the gym on a regular basis or whatever, the thing is block out those times in your schedule when you're pretty sure you're not going to be able to study. Okay, 5, 6, and 7, if you don't do any of this other stuff, this is really important. Okay, before you go into a class, take at least 5 minutes, or preferably a little bit more, preview what you're going to be talking about. Now, you're not studying at this point, right? What you're doing is, like in my classes, my students have like an outline or notes or whatever, they know what we're going to talk about. Look through those. You're not looking to learn anything. What you're doing is looking for context. You're going to go, oh yeah, I remember seeing mitochondria in the notes. Or, oh yeah, I remember seeing cellular respiration, something like that. Just kind of give yourself a little bit of idea of what that lecture is going to be on or that lab is going to be on. Not asking you to know anything, right? Just take a look at it and schedule that in. You know now how much you get, 5 minutes to 30 minutes? Any more than 30 minutes, I think you're spending too much time on it. How much time you get, it depends. If you're running from one class to another, you might get 35 seconds, I don't know. But whatever's going to work with your schedule. Okay, so previewing the new material. After you're done with your classes, as soon as you can that day, schedule some review time, anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. So you guys, when you sat in on that lecture, and you maybe took notes or maybe didn't, the information that's there is sitting in what's called short-term memory. If you don't do something to move it to long-term memory, it's going to start to decay within 24 hours, right? And I'm going to show you this later on. If you were to look at that material within 24 hours, you're still retaining about 80% of what you walked out of that lecture with. So if you're already retaining that much, now it doesn't mean retaining everything, it's whatever you walked out with. You still got about 80% of that 24 hours later. If you wait one more day, you're down to less than 50% of that material. So you know, have you ever done that where like 2 weeks later you go, did we ever even talk about this? Because it doesn't even look familiar. So that decaying, that's what I'm talking about. If you don't do something to start to get it into long-term memory, it's going to be gone. And then you start studying for a test and you have nothing to go on, right? So, and when I say immediately, I at least mean that day, as soon as you can. And you guys, this is not your major studying. This is just taking a look at it, reviewing it. If there's something in your notes, you need to kind of, oh God, I can hardly read that. Okay? All right, we're not done yet. Okay, then schedule your intensive study or review time for each day for each class. Okay, somewhere in there, you've got to sit down and actually study and schedule that in as well. And this may be, I tell my students, if you've got 8 hours to study, please don't spend all 8 hours studying. That's your brain's you're wasting your time after a while. I would say no more than 2 hours, and then take a break. Go out, do some physical activity. Do just anything, okay? And then come back to it later. But, I have students who tell me, oh, I sat there for 8 hours. Why? You're wasting your time after a while, okay? So, yes, schedule. And then do you all kind of know the rule for hour study? Kind of, there's a sort of a rule of thumb, is that for every hour you sit in a lecture or a lab, you're looking at about 2.5 to 3 hours of study time to really command that information, okay? So 2.5 to 3 hours of study. And what you don't want to do is wait till the very end. You want to be accruing all of those hours. Time is key, guys. That's what allows your brain to change. Okay, and then a weekly review for each course, preferably at the end of the week. You guys, what this does is by having preview, by having review, by having your intensive review, by having all this, it means you're constantly engaged in the material. And here's what we know. Students who are constantly engaged in the material do better. That's it, right? But what I like about doing this is you're not always just sitting down to study. You're sitting down to different focus each time. All right, super important, physical activity. And I don't tell you this because I come from, clearly, look, I don't come from a physical activity background. I'm telling you this because we know that physical activity, you guys, okay, when you are physically active, your body produces something called lactate. Have you heard of that before? Not you heard of lactic acid? No? Okay, well, it's not exactly lactic acid, but it's kind of like that. But what lactate is, it's a chemical that when your muscles exercise, you produce this chemical called lactate. Lactate goes into the bloodstream. A lot of it ends up at your brain, and your brain actually uses it for fuel. So have you ever noticed if you're really bored, you get up and run around, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm ready to go. It's because your brain is being flooded with lactate, and lactate is a source of fuel for your brain, and it's what your brain is going to say, I want to burn that. That makes sense, right? I mean, it's good for a lot of things, but just in terms of, if it's about changing your brain, let's give your brain the fuel that it needs. And then you guys, don't schedule yourself so tight that you don't have some open time. You need emergencies come up or stuff you didn't anticipate. What you don't want to do is schedule every second of every single day. That's just not healthy. So leave yourself some open time. All right? And then the other thing too, and this is for academics, assuming most of you are not here on Friday, most of you probably not here Saturday or Sunday, you got to have playtime, right? I mean, all work and no play is not healthy. So, and think of it as your reward, right? And I can tell you this is what I did is, so I worked Monday through Friday, and then I went to school, and classes were typically sometime between Monday through Thursday. What I did was I would study on my lunch hour, Monday through Thursday. Friday, I would go out to lunch with my colleagues because you can't be that person that just is antisocial. Friday, I'd always go out to lunch with everybody. I would usually spend the bulk of Saturday, Sunday studying, and then Sundays, I didn't touch a book. I didn't work on papers, ever. And that was my thing. That's my time to spend with my family, right? But here's the thing. I experienced a lot more success once I started kind of being more regimented and just working on it every single day. I never actually had to study on a Sunday. I never actually had to work on the paper. In fact, I can remember this. I had a grad class as an undergraduate. My paper was done a week before it was due, and none of the grad students were. And it was just because I just kept working on it and got it done. And trust me, y'all, I'm not that smart. Right? I'm not a genius, but just by doing that, and it absolutely changed my entire academic career. All right, are we good with that? Making sense so far? Okay, so then the third thing you're going to do is the daily to-do list. Okay, now this is the key to being efficient. This is the key to getting stuff done. And I mean, have you experienced this where you, at the end of the day, you go, oh, dang, I forgot to do this. Oh, man, I was supposed to do this, and now I got to get it done tomorrow or else I'm out of school or whatever. if you're experiencing stuff like that, and it's more common than not, it's not that you're forgetful, it's that you've just got to write things down, right? That's the bottom line. And so the daily to-do list is really, really key. In fact, I tell anybody who I give this lecture to, if you walk in my office anytime, you will see this chicken scratch all over this sheet, and every day, just this constantly revolving sheet with stuff I have to do. Okay, so what with the to-do list, it's you remember to carry out all your necessary tasks. Hopefully you tackle the most important ones first, and then you don't get stressed by a large number of unimportant jobs. If I were to think about all the stuff I have to do in a day, I probably would freak out. But when I write it down and can see it, and especially when I start scratching stuff off, that's awesome, right? And it is, it's really a lot easier to get things done. Okay, so find the to-do list that works for you. So what I did was put in another example. If you go to the next page. Okay, so that's called a prioritized to-do list. And basically, I think this is great if you really haven't done to-do lists before. What you do is you would write out, okay, so like for you all, what do you got to do tomorrow? And it might be, I have to email this person, I have to get this application in, I got to, whatever it is you got to get done in that day. And then what you do is prioritize them. And you put an A next to anything that I got to get that done for sure. A B, hopefully I get that done. C, if I don't get it done, I got to get it done the day after that. And so you start to prioritize things. After a while, you don't really need to do that. But it's writing all of those things down. Okay, so here's the way you really do this, you guys. You write down everything you have to do. And the way I do mine, I have faculty responsibilities. So I just put faculty and I write down any faculty related thing. I got to email this student, I need to post this on Titanium, I need to finish this exam, and then I do a lot of stuff with the teachers union. So I have that category. And then I have my stuff with the Health Academy, and I write all that stuff down. And then I have my other stuff with the Honor Society. So I have all these like categories, and then I just kind of look at it and know what I got to get done today. It's a revolving list though. I always have more on there than I can get done. Anything that I don't get done, it's because it's so far down the list. I always transfer that to the next day's list. And pretty much, I end up getting most things done, right? But you're going to be shocked, actually, at how much you get done when you see it in writing and you start tackling it like, I got to do this, I got to do this. So, find the style that works for you. But honestly, these three things are absolutely the key to managing your time. Okay, now, in terms of the daily to-do list, there's something called Eisenhower's urgent important principle. Do we know who Dwight Eisenhower was? Some guy. Yeah, he was a president of this country. Okay, so Eisenhower, you're cracking up. Eisenhower, though, was known for getting stuff done. Like the guy could manage to get so much stuff in a day. And so he was talking, and somebody asked him, like, how do you get so much done? And he said, this is what he said: I have two kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important. The important are never urgent. If you think about it, what makes something urgent? Time, right? A lot of times the stuff that we think is urgent, it really isn't. But how many times have you let something important slide and slide and slide, and you're like, uh-oh, I got to get it done today. You let the important become what's urgent. But if it's truly important, it's not going to be urgent because you're going to get it done. Does that make sense? Got to kind of think about that for a second. Okay. So, and basically what Eisenhower said is that if you do this, you're not just being efficient and getting things done. You're getting things done effectively, which means you're doing them in the right order. You're tackling things so that the important doesn't become urgent. You're recognizing what's urgent and also important, what's urgent and not so important. Okay, and so what he said is that if you understand the difference, you're going to minimize your stress over, like, I have to get all this done. Okay, so here's the thing, you guys, and this is sort of a general rule. Important activities, these are the things that lead to your success. to you achieving your goals. So is studying important? Yes. Is going to class important? Absolutely, right? It's the things that lead to your success. Urgent activities. Here's the thing, you guys. A lot of times urgent activities, they're not about your success. They're about somebody else's. Right? How many times I said, oh my gosh, I totally need your help with this. And you're like, okay, this is really inconvenient, but okay. It's not about you. It's about their success. And so it's important to recognize sometimes stuff we think is urgent, it's really not urgent to you. It's urgent to somebody else. And sometimes, guess what you have to say to those things? You gotta say no. You gotta say no. Right? Now, here's the thing. Don't be that person that says no every time somebody needs your help, because that makes you a jerk, right? But sometimes, and you gotta give yourself permission to say, I understand and I would love to help you, but I have so many things right now that I just have to say no. It's actually okay to say no sometimes. Not all the time, because then nobody's ever gonna help you. But is that making sense to you all? Okay, so basically this is how it goes. When you are looking at, you've got all your stuff written down. Okay, the things you're gonna do first are the things that are important and urgent. Important in terms of your success, and they are time sensitive. Of course, that's what you would do first, right? Okay, and I can tell you, I wrote this wheel all the time because I got important and urgent things to do, but when I was a student, I'm like, ooh, this looks like a good time to mop the floor, right? In fact, we joke, all of us talked about how clean our apartments were when we were in school, because anything looks better than studying. I'm gonna clean the bathroom. Once you graduate, you're like, the bathroom can wait, right? But I've done this too. Okay, so that's what you're gonna do first. Next, you're gonna tackle the things that are important, yet they have not become urgent. Important things that are critical to your success. Number 3, these are the things that are not important, but urgent. This might not be taking time out of your day to help somebody. It's not important to you. It's important to them, right? So important, not important, but urgent. A lot of times, it may involve helping somebody else. And the last thing, not important and not urgent, but at some point, kind of has to get done. How are we doing with that? Kind of makes sense, I hope. Okay. All right. So with the ABCs of to-do list, that's the one that I gave you. So you would write down all of your daily to-dos for today, and then prioritize those. However you want to do it. I don't need A's and B's anymore, but you might if you're just starting out with this. All right. So here's the thing, you guys. That is time management. That's what it is. That's all it is. But if you writing all of this down and then not executing it, you're still not a good time manager. Okay? It's planning followed by execution. Okay? If you write it down and you don't do it, you're still a bad time manager. All right? Just do it. To steal from Nike. Do we have any questions on that? Pretty straightforward? Yeah. I wish there was magic. I could just do that, but that's all it is. Okay.
It's very good.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we'll just go into the next one, which is note taking. Listening and note taking. This is really more on note taking, not as much on listening, but more on, just listen. Okay. So this is more on note taking.
Take note.
I don't have to, she gave us everything. Okay, do you have the one on note taking?
It's this.
Yeah. Yeah. So lots and lots of words on this one. And it's just kind of so you have it to look back on, but all right. First of all, how do you all feel about your note-taking skills? Do you feel like you're good at it, or good enough, or at your average? Do you feel like you just don't get down the important stuff, or?
What I feel is important, I would take down.
Say that again?
What I feel like is important, I would take down, but then I would do the details.
Okay, which can be troublesome. Yeah. Well, how do you feel about your note-taking skills?
Well, if they had like that, I would copy all the notes, and then the teacher would tell something, and you should write it down to help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not really.
Okay. And you feel average on yours? Do you feel? Why
I
do you
feel like
feel?
the same like parents, like I also like writing things down on the board, and the teachers are all right, like I write that too.
Okay. But if they didn't tell you that, would you not think to write it down?
But if I felt something.
Yeah. Because sometimes when I'm teaching, I think, how can I stress more anymore that this is super important? And nobody's writing it down. Like, you should actually be writing that down. What'd you say? Oh, man. But I'm just, don't know. How do you feel about yours?
For me, I would like whatever's on the board, I would write it down if it's important. But when a teacher's like giving a lectures, I would look with like hearing like a keys words,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like start writing it down and then talk about it, like in my opinions, like that.
Okay.
So you connect the
Okay. So you're trying to write more in your own words.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good. But it's also hard. And it's also scary.
Yes.
Because what if your words, like, what if my words are wrong?
Yeah, that's right. You just
Yeah.
copy it down and then listen to the professor say.
Yeah. One of the things that will help all of you with that is previewing if you have access to what that lecture is about, if the teacher gives you PowerPoint slides or an outline or whatever, if you preview that, right, that already sets you up for what are the keywords, right? Because if I take the time to put a keyword, to put something in my outline, it's because it's important. So that might actually kind of help you with that, okay? I think note-taking, it is a scary thing because you feel like I'm kind of writing my own version of the Bible. I'd like to get it right. And it's scary. Okay. One of the things when they asked me if I could put one on like note-taking, in my mind, I'm thinking, great, students are going to come in thinking I'm going to give them like the keys to the universe. And I'm going to show them, well, here's my magic wand, and here's how you become a great note-taker. Because that's actually not true. If I could do that, I would bottle that, sell it, be done, right? So I'm not giving you the keys to the universe. I'm not giving you any shortcuts. You're going to have to do the work. I'm just kind of going to help you think about your notes a little bit differently, and we'll see what happens. We're not doing that because I didn't give you that time. Okay. First of all, you guys, I want you to start thinking differently about taking notes. And I can say throughout most of my undergraduate degree, taking notes was just a task that I had to do that I would put to use at some other point when I started to study for the exam. I didn't really think about it as actually being part of the study process. It was just one more item that I had to look at as I was preparing for exams. Not really thinking about, I could have been using my notes much more effectively along the way. So if you're taking, and not just taking notes, but taking good notes, can help you improve your understanding by making you convert difficult ideas into your own words. So we've already got somebody trying to do that. But that's one of the things is, ideally, if you can't take notes in your own words, like I think if a professor is going blah, 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 you're trying to figure out what they just said, understand it to the point where you can put it in your own words. That's a lot to ask, right? Because, now you're trying to just process it and write it down and they're on to the next thing, so now you're behind. I think that's a lot to process. So maybe this isn't what you do in the moment, but maybe later. But putting it into your own words is a fantastic thing. In fact, I would rather see a student write an answer that's not so eloquent, maybe it's the way I said it, but I know they understand it, right? We speak a different language at this point, and so that's okay. I would much rather, and I tell my students, if you write it down verbatim, I know you don't understand it. Because then you would never write it down the way that I said it. You would never explain it that way to somebody. Prepare for writing fuller, better connected arguments in your essays. Okay, again, this is not just taking notes in class. This is when you really start working with your notes, and I'm going to show you that. So if you've got to write essay responses, if you've actually been practicing that in your notes by developing what's already in there, you're going to write much better essays when it comes down to it. Even if you're not that great of a writer, you're going to write better than if you had not kind of developed your notes. Become more focused and time efficient in your exam revision period. Now what that is, you all may never have exam revision in your career. It depends. But what exam revision is, you take your exam, it gets graded, we give it back to you, and you actually get another shot at it. That's revising your exam. Have you guys ever had one of those?
I don't know, but it was like for summer class for English, they give us back.
Like writing an essay.
Yeah.
So same kind of thing. So you can revise it. Yeah, I think it would kind of fall along the same lines as that. But you know, so exam revision, I had a couple classes. I had one as an undergrad, one as a graduate student. As an undergrad, exam revision, you know, they would give it back to you, and you had like 15 minutes to make any revisions you wanted to. Well, if your notes, and you could use your notes, right? If those notes were really well developed, it was pretty easy to find what I'm looking for. Grad classes, those are all essay exams, but it gave us a chance when we got that back to maybe you need to round out this argument a little bit more. So it kind of depends. I think when I was in school, classes were a lot smaller and teachers could do that. Now, I don't know how common it is now, but should you see that? And good notes will help you figure out where you're at in terms of your studying. Okay, so here's the thing, you guys. Note taking, first of all, I want to deviate from this. I want you to think of your notes as the end all. So that when you sit down and you're really going to study, like for that exam and you're getting close to it, you don't even need that textbook anymore. You don't need anything, you just need your notes. Because what you have put together is something awesome to study from. And to do that, it is at minimum a two-step process. I think most of you, as I did, notes was a one-shot thing. Sit in class, write it down, and then you'll look at it later, right? Okay, if you go to step maybe 2, 3, and 4, which is later, go back, summarize, condense, organize your notes. You guys, that's all part of studying. If you go back, I mean, how many times do you ever go back and just rewrite your notes? Just because? You know, by doing that, it's a form of studying. But if you go back to your notes, start summarizing these things. Maybe you couldn't get it all in your own words today, but tomorrow if you've got time, go back and put it into your own words. Summarize it, condense it. You know, my students, when they're trying to write down every word I say, and I'm like, you guys, this is not the gospel according to Dr. B. Just get the idea and you're fine. But get out of that, take it down the gospel. Condense it and organize it, right? So you're putting them into a form that's gonna serve you well. And then too, see where it talks about revisiting your notes? That fits into preview, review, all that kind of stuff, so that you start to see how these things connect. And then also revisiting your notes, no matter what you do, is gonna help in memory. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is several different types of note-taking. One is not better than the other. At the end of the day, you use what's working for you. And so you might not change one thing, right? And that's okay. But I'm going to kind of show you a method that I think works really well. So the first method is called sequential notes. What that really means, you guys know what a court stenographer is? Is this a skit on Saturday Night Live? Stenographer, or is like, I don't know, I don't watch that stuff. Okay, a stenographer is the person in court who sits there like this and takes down every single word that ever comes out of anybody's mouth. Yeah, but that's the way a lot of students will take notes. They want to get down every single word. So by the end of the lecture, they got a lot of words written down. They have no idea what the lecture is about. I totally did that. I did that, right, as an undergrad. I mean, and I could just write insanely quick. Now, the other thing too is a different time. We didn't have PowerPoint. We didn't have, well, there was no www dot anything. It did not exist yet. Like we had to do that. You also too, we didn't have phones. You could just put up there and record the lecture. We didn't have any of that. So I felt like we kind of had no choice but to be a stenographer, because it was kind of a one-shot deal. You couldn't just email your professor saying, hey, can you clarify this point? You actually had to go to this place called their office and talk to them face to face, right? So now here's the thing. It really is, it's taking as verbatim notes as you can. And that's okay, but the problem is you're not making connections in the lecture. You're just getting down every word. Now, you might need to do a little more of that because you said you get the general point, but you miss sometimes the detail. So you might have to maybe get a little more stenographer on me. I don't know. But here's the thing. This is not the best way to do it, but if it works for you, then maybe it's the best way for you. Okay? So there's that. Try to get out of that. And honestly, the older you get and the longer you're a student, the more you will find yourself getting out of that because you become more confident. And am I really hearing this? Am I getting this right? Right? The more you learn, the easier it actually becomes to figure out what's important in all these words coming out of this person's mouth. So you're also young right now that this skill is going to develop for you. Okay, annotated notes. This would actually be my favorite way of doing this. I find people either love this or hate it. But I can tell you, if you're thinking about making your notes, everything so that when I'm really ready to sit down and study, this is all I need. I think this is a good way to go. So if you turn, can I borrow this for a second? What I did was put in, this is a sample of what you would do with the Cornell method. And I put in just a different version on the back. In case that one might make more sense to you. But let me show you what you're going to do with the Cornell method. And you guys, you can actually buy paper that's designed, it's Cornell paper, right? It's the Cornell method of note-taking. It's already done for you. But remember, note-taking should be at minimum a 2-step process where you write it down, but then you're summarizing and condensing and all that kind of stuff. That's what the Cornell method does. And basically, here's what I think. I think using the Cornell method, what you end up doing is getting your notes right the first time. Because you're leaving time for the second step of this. Okay, so here's what you do with the Cornell method. Okay, in this part of the paper, right, so you're 6 inches and 2.5 inches, and then you got 2 inches down here, right? Okay, so here's what you do. In this is where you write down, this is where you take notes in your class, right? And you're not trying to cram, you know, everything in the universe, because you only have, what, 5 or 6 inches here, right? 6 or 8 inches here. But you're gonna write down all of the stuff that you think is important in there, okay? Later, you're going to go back, and at the bottom, you're going to write a summary, a very brief summary of what's on this page. And have you ever seen this where you go, well, I know it's in here somewhere, and you're flipping through your notes like crazy, and you can't find it, right? This is a great way to help you figure out where things are. So you're writing a very brief summary down here. And you guys, when you write a summary, you're already starting to condense those notes, okay? Over here, this is your recall column or your Q column. This is where you start to write down things like, I don't know, maybe do you guys ever invent those acronyms in your own head to help you remember crazy things? That might be where you write that down. But it's over in here. This would be too if you've got a question over something, or you need a term that needs to be clarified, or whatever it is. But this is really where you start to put those things that are going to help you learn what you need to know, right? And then stuff you do here, okay, in this, see where they talk about record, but this is where too, if you've got questions, write those questions down. This is where too you would cover the note-taking column here. and look at questions or keywords over here and see, did I get this or not? Does it kind of make sense? So what you're doing is you're setting up something to actually help you study. Initially to help you learn it, but also then to help you make sure, okay, I'm ready for this. This is the stuff too that you're going to review over here. How are we doing with that? So it's pretty straightforward, but now this is the other thing too, you guys. When you're reading your textbook, you should only have to read your textbook one time. Because what you don't want to do, when you read a textbook, you're not reading like a Harry Potter novel, right? Textbooks are designed to convey information, and a lot of it. So you want to match up what you're reading with what's on here. This is where you put in stuff to help clarify or whatever it is. But when my students go, I don't know why I didn't do great. I read the book 8 times. I was thinking, why? You don't just read continuously on cellular respiration. At some point, you got to sit down and figure out how it actually works. So think about, if you can, using the textbook to fill in all of the blanks that are here, if that's possible. Oh, look at that. I forget I do this stuff. So you record, you summarize. This is where you reduce it. Does that make more sense now? Okay. Okay. That's just how to do the Cornell method. Does that make sense? Okay. So I think for most classes, that's a great way to go. Another way to take notes is concept mapping. Now, I don't think concept mapping is a good way to take notes during a class. It's a good way to summarize your notes later. So are you all familiar with concept mapping? Sometimes it's called mind mapping. Basically, so you get your initial concept and then you build a tree around it. Okay, so concept mapping is where you take some concept, and then you start branching out all kinds of stuff from there. And you start seeing connections and things like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so like this is one I found. So here's my concept map. My central concept is animals. And then I have sub-concepts. So the different kinds that live in water, and then we have sharks and dolphins and fish. The kind that fly in the sky. Maybe we talked about birds and ducks and geese and things like that. But here's the thing. Can you imagine how many words it actually took to convey all of this? It's a lot of words, right? But by reducing it down to this, once you see the concepts, do you really need all those words? Right? You don't. And I think concept mapping is great. If you're taking any biology class, any physics class, any chemistry class, for sure. Works great in sociology classes, even psychology classes. This is a great way. You guys, you don't need every single word to understand. You know you don't. Think about what you communicate when you talk via text. Right? You need 4 things that aren't actually even real words. And it says, hey, meet me on here Friday night at 8 o'clock. And it's like, how'd you get that? Right? But you know how to do that. You don't need every single word. The thing is, textbooks are written to be grammatically correct. That takes a lot of words. Hopefully your professors are speaking and they're speaking with relatively good grammar. It takes a lot of words. You don't need to own all those words to understand what we're talking about. So I think this is a great way to go. I did this like crazy as an undergrad, and then like I do it all the time. I mean, this is when I have, like, if I was giving a lecture on this, this is what I would go in with, and that's it. I don't need all those words to tell me that I need to put a preposition or something. So great way to go. Now this would be a difficult thing to do in class, right? Because you don't know what it's supposed to look like, but I think a good way to go after. And then a matrix. Okay, so matrices, that's multiple matrices. A matrix. Now you guys, a matrix doesn't work for everything, but what a matrix is good for, it's kind of like a chart. And it's where you can start to compare and contrast different ideas. Like I made a matrix for the different types of notes. So here we have sequential notes. Remember, those are where you're writing every single thing down. Annotated notes, that's the Cornell method. Concept mapping, and then a matrix. And then the different uses for all of them. So what this helps you do is you've got 4 different ways. This helps you sort of compare and contrast. What are the uses? What are the benefits? What is the format?
It's like you use this for history.
Yeah, you could totally use that for history. Especially, like, I think where this comes in helpful too, if you've got any class that's like heavy in theory, psychology classes usually have a lot of theory, so maybe 4 or 5 theories to explain the same thing. And so it helps you if you put the theories kind of side by side, right? If you keep them completely separate all the time, sometimes you don't make the connections. But looking for, and basically you guys know what compare and contrast is, right? Compare is looking for similarities, contrast is where you're looking for differences. So sometimes this is a nice way to just line it all up as briefly as you can. Again, you could never take notes like this in class unless the teacher set it up for you. This is one of those things you might go back to your notes and start revising and condensing and things like that. How are we doing so far? Yes? Okay. So a couple things to improve your note taking. Make clear and accurate notes. Sometimes I look at said notes and I don't even know how the person can read at all. And so ideally, okay. One of the things that will help with note taking is coming to class being prepared. That is, if you're going to do that Cornell method, be ready for it. But also, too, you guys, that previewing thing is so important. You will take better notes if you come to class, maybe knowing 10 words. I've seen it, but I don't know what the heck it means. You're going to take better notes. Okay, this is important, too, because you don't know if you got everything down, right? So you're doing your stenographer thing. You should have at least 1 or 2 buddies in class where you can compare your notes to make sure that you got the same stuff. Maybe they got something you didn't, or you got 2 things that are conflicting. That is really a key thing. And so you want to ideally, first of all, find somebody who's as conscientious as you are. Don't find somebody who's not going to go, oh, well, she's going to take that, so I'll do whatever. You don't want to do that, but ideally, you guys, you want to get a buddy in every class that you can do that with. That's a good thing. Minimize distractions. And that even means, like, where you sit in class, minimize distractions for yourself. I know I see more and more students who want to sit in the front because the further they are, the more distractions there are, right? Every computer that's on in front of them, looking at Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. But ideally, where you sit yourself in class, minimize distractions. If you got that chatterbox next to you all the time, I mean, it's awkward, but get away from them. And then, of course, organize your notes. Use abbreviations and symbols. All right, we all gone into some form of allied health? PT, OT, social work. What are we doing? What are we hoping for? PT? Nursing? What is it? Health science? What? Psychology? I'm going to be an exotic dancer. Okay, here's the thing. You all, as a healthcare practitioner, you will spend your life taking notes. Trust me. And you will learn more abbreviations and symbols than you even knew existed in the universe. It's what you have to do to survive. As a student, start using those right now. And I used to always be afraid that, well, if I use that abbreviation, what if I forget what it means? So then I would write the abbreviation, and then half the time I'd write what it means, and I'm like, that's stupid, right? You all don't need to worry about that anymore because you have Google, right? But honestly, you want to speed up your note-taking by using, at as the A with the circle around it. There are as many as you can. Hopefully write clearly, review your notes, write down any questions you have. Okay, we good on there? Some of this is redundant, I know, but okay, so I wanted to show you this. This is that thing about when you should review your notes, and this was some research based on a whole lot of students. And what they did was they looked at students who reviewed their notes on the same day as class. When they looked at them one day later, the students had reviewed their notes, so they left with, now this is not leaving class knowing 100% of what was talked about. It's whatever you leave with, that's your 100%. Okay, you might have every word, you got 100%. You might not have every word, maybe you have 75% of what I talked about. Okay, but it's whatever you leave class with and you own it right now. Those people who reviewed their notes the same day, by the next day, these folks were still retaining about 90% of what they walked out with. The folks who didn't review their notes that same day, one day later, they're not even at 50% of what they had. That stuff in short term, if you don't move it, start doing what you need to get it to long term, it's going to be gone. That make sense? Okay, they looked at those students who, if they were reviewing their notes on a daily basis, 2 weeks later, still more than 80%. These kids right here, what, 25%, right? And so it's clear, the kids who are reviewing those notes on a more routine basis, bottom line is they're remembering more. And isn't that really what we test you on, is what you remember? That's really what we test you on. So you can see here too, look at it, 9 weeks later. I mean, the reality is, well, all these folks are looking probably at an F if they don't do something different. Make sense? Okay. All right. You guys, a couple things with listening. Okay. Listening is a difficult, it's a difficult one to discuss because, you know, I think every student's trying to listen for meaning. What does that mean? Right? Listen for meaning. This is where the previewing is really important. The previewing sort of sets the stage and helps you figure out what is meaningful here, right? So I can't just say, oh, listen for meaning. Well, how do you do that? I think the only thing I can tell you to listen for meaning is ideally if you go in with a little bit of context. And it doesn't mean you know what all of it means. It just knows, well, I know we're talking about cellular respiration and there's a whole bunch written about pH in there, but I don't even know what pH is. That's all fine and good. It gives you context and it's going to help you figure out what's important. Adjust your note-taking style to the lecture. Bottom line, you might have to be a stenographer. If that teacher's just going so fast that that's all you can do. You might get to adjust it to a matrix. Maybe the teacher's actually helping you create a matrix while they're talking. So it's okay. It doesn't have to be, this is how I take notes and I never change. You can change it. It depends on the class and what works. Okay, tackle the difficult to understand material. Okay. You know what the most important thing for you to study is the thing you don't actually understand, right? It's the thing that's going to limit all the other aspects of your studying. So as much as we don't like to, honestly, the stuff you should really focus on is the stuff you are struggling with. Because once you get that, everything else is a lot easier. And that means, you know, going to office hours, working with your colleagues in the class. But you've really got to do that. You can't just say, well, maybe it won't matter, because that can be the thing that makes or breaks the entire section that you're going to have an exam over. Concentrate and pay attention. I think that's funny. These all come from really professional resources. Well, if you want to listen, pay attention. Okay. Be prepared. Okay. Focus on what's important. You know, a lot of these is redundant, but this all comes from all different types of research on this. This is one of them. Choose to be interested. Okay. We all have classes that we love. We all have classes that we would rather eat our shoe than go to. But guess what? You got to do it. So you can choose to at least be more interested than not interested at all. You can choose to do that. It's not, you're not a victim completely, right? So if you choose to be somewhat interested. All right, y'all have any questions over the note-taking thing? Does that help a little bit? Or just try the Cornell method. So did they give you something that has Cornell stuff in it? Or? I had suggested maybe they give you some Cornell paper.
I used to do it in high school.
You did Cornell in high school?
Yeah. We stopped like since sophomore year or freshman year, depending on like the teachers.
I don't know why they stopped, because it's going to serve you so well in college. I don't know why they stopped. Well, we got extra time.
Some teachers, like for biology, they would use that. You know.
The Cornell notes?
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys, I wasn't planning on doing this, but with 4 of you, it goes really quick. So let me just really quick talk some stuff about reading the textbook, because you don't read a textbook the same way you read, like, you know, some fictional, right, Harry Potter or something. It's not designed to do that. So just kind of let me give you some guidelines on that stuff. First of all, I want to talk about reading myths. One is I have to read every word. No, you totally do not. You don't. You don't have to read every word. Remember that. How many words exactly? Okay, remember that textbooks are written to be grammatically correct. You don't have to read every single word to get that. You can skip the to's and the does and all that kind of stuff. You have to practice reading that way, but after a while, you kind of realize, like, oh, you don't need all this extra stuff, right? But imagine if we wrote textbooks with only what you needed. That's not going to work either. You don't have to read every word. Reading once is enough. That's still not true. You know, earlier I did say you should only have to read your textbook once. In a perfect world, depends what it is. Sometimes you got to read it and you go, wait, what did I just read? And you read it again, right? So I know, like in chemistry, biology, physics, you're probably going to have to read more than once, but it's not like reading the whole chapter more than once. It's reading that, what is that section? What are they saying here? Or if you do sometimes stuff in history, if it's really complex stuff, or stuff, I don't know, maybe it's a class in like social justice or whatever. It can be really meaty reading material. But the idea is, you guys, you read it. It might take once or twice or 3 times to get the idea, and then you should be done with that. You shouldn't have to go back and keep reading it and reading it. Take whatever that is, put it in your notes where it belongs, and then you should be good to go with that. What's 3? It's sinful to skip passages in reading. No, it's not. Some books are designed so that you don't have to read every single thing. You can jump from topic to topic. Now, history, maybe not a great idea because it's kind of linear, but you should be able to jump around in the textbooks. Textbooks are about, you know, conveying content. It's not necessarily a story. It always has to go in that sequential order. You know where that came from? It's sinful to skip passages. That actually came from like biblical times. And apparently it was sinful then. But you're all not reading the Bible most of the time in your classes, so you're okay. Machines are necessary to improve my reading speed. I don't know what this is. I don't know where this came from. But I don't know. I don't know what that is. But I saw it in all the literature I read, and so I don't even know what that is. So we're just going to skip it. If I skim or read too rapidly, my comprehension will drop. That's not necessarily true either. Sometimes, depending what it is, you can skim over it. If it's something you know you already know, you can skim over it, right? It just depends on what it is. There's something about my eyes that keeps me from reading fast. I've actually had students say this, no, my eyes don't let me read fast. Reading is not an eyeball thing. Reading is a brain thing, right? Your eyes are not the limitation. Okay, yeah, it's a brain thing. All right, okay, so you guys, first of all, the goal of a textbook is different than a Harry Potter novel. It's to educate you and inform you, right? That's what it's about. They communicate ideas through explanations of information. That's why it's okay to sometimes skip the explanation if it's information that right now you don't necessarily need. You don't have to read every to and the in there to get the gist of the information. But okay, so what I'm going to do is give you a 4-step strategy for how to read a textbook. Okay, first of all, one of the things is, should you be spend reading? And what I find is that most of the time we underestimate how much time, like, oh, I've got this chapter, I can do it in 45 minutes. And then 45 minutes later, you're not even halfway through, right? So this is a really good guideline. Take the number of pages you have to read, or sorry, multiply the number of pages you have to read by 5 minutes. And so every page you've got to read, anticipate about 5 minutes for that page. Some will take you more, but some are going to take you less. But that's kind of ballpark, right? So about 5 minutes per page. And then you want to make sure you guys don't sit down and try to read a textbook for 2 or 3 hours at a time. Your brain is just going to fatigue. So really, if you think about it, if you divide the reading into 10-page chunks, you're really looking at about 50 minutes at a time. right? Maybe 50, 60 minutes. Any longer than that, you're getting fatigued, you're not making the most use of your time. Okay? And then, while you're reading, you should be taking notes in that book, highlighting things. And there's a rule on highlighting, because sometimes my students, they open the book and I just think, why don't you just buy a yellow book and then white out a couple of words right there? Because I'll like do this with their whole highlighter and the pages all crinkled and everything. You really, on any given page, at maximum, don't highlight more than 20%. Okay, the idea about highlighter is to focus on, here's what's important. So maybe it's like the sliding filament mechanism of muscle contraction. Highlight that, because right below that, that's where the explanation is. But don't highlight that whole thing. That's how you start missing stuff. It's in here somewhere, I know, I highlighted it. But if you highlighted 80% of your book, you're never going to find it. So you want to highlight. The other thing is, and I don't know if you're comfortable doing this, take notes in your textbook, right? That textbook is not designed to, at the end of the semester, be this beautiful, pristine thing. It should be this thing that you have completely dissected as much as possible. It should have notes, it should have highlight, it's okay to bend pages. That's what a textbook is for. It's not so you get done and it's in perfect condition and it looks like you never used it. Don't do that, right? I mean, you're paying money for this thing. You know if you turn it back in, you're going to get pennies on your dollar. Use that textbook like crazy. Okay, so here's your 4-step method. Okay, so you've got your time. You know you're going to spend about 50 minutes at a time. You know, too, that you're going to have your highlighter, you know, maybe your notes and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so number 1, read the textbook backwards. And by that, what I mean is figure out what this chapter is about to begin with and what's important. And one of the best ways, go to the questions at the very back. Because those questions, guess what, you guys? Those are the most important topics in that chapter. That's why we bother asking you a question about it. Okay? Doesn't mean you can answer those questions, but again, you're setting context. Then read the final summary of the chapter, because the summary now condenses the most important points. So maybe you got 20 questions. From that, now you've got what you're going to read. It's condensed even more. Then look at the headings and subdivisions of the chapter, right? And divide that up into chunks. Then you start reading at the introduction. Start at the end to get an idea of where you're going. Number 2, read for the big ideas. Okay? Here's the thing. Textbooks are very thorough. Oftentimes more thorough than you actually need, right? Most of the time, we don't ask you for every flipping detail. We want you to get the big idea. And the big idea is, you guys, that's what those large, topic headings and all that kind of stuff, big ideas are easy to spot in a textbook. They are. They're bolded, something's going on there. And then, this is good. Look for the complete sentence throughout that summarizes and drives each subdivision, and you'll have identified the big ideas. Okay, you're reading, and you're either going to find sort of this summary thing, this statement, you're either going to find it at the beginning or toward the end. Because it might say, okay, this next section we're going to discuss blah, 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 blah. That's the big idea. Or at the very end, it might have a summary kind of thing. But that's usually, if you're going to kind of ballpark it, look for the beginning and end. It tells you what the big idea is. Okay, so once you've got your big ideas, so we start from the back. That helps us focus on what's important. Then we read for the big ideas. Once we get the big ideas, now we start looking for key details. Because you got to have details at some point. So once you have the big idea needs support. Like if my big idea is, all muscle cells, when they are working, are going to prefer to metabolize glucose. That's the big idea. Then I got to tell you how that happens. So once you get the big idea, now you start looking for the details that support that big idea. All right? So here's the thing. It's going to look different depending on what the subject is, right? So in history books, what are in history book, the big idea is the Civil War. Well, what are the supporting details? How about the dates, the people, the places, right? If it's in grammar, how about the rules of grammar? I don't know, do you actually, I guess English classes are kind of grammar classes. What's the rules of that? If you're taking a foreign language, vocab, super important, right? You know how every chapter you've got that glossary of your new vocabulary words and all that kind of stuff. So here's the thing. Use the book to help you make sure, number one, that your notes are covering what they should be covering, and then you're getting out of you're reading what you should. And you do that, go back to those questions at the end of that chapter. Those questions, you guys, I guarantee it, those are the most important points in that chapter. That's why there's a question on it. And so make sure you understand those answers. Make sure you've got that information in your notes. Okay, read the book once, but your notes multiple times. See, in theory, you should never have to read a textbook more than once. But if you're doing it right, ideally, you guys, maybe you're once or twice reading that textbook, transfer that information into those notes. Build those notes into like the end-all thing. That is your product that's going to get you ready. Let's see. I'm not going to cover this since you guys, it kind of goes with note taking. Anyway. All right. That's really all I can tell you on there without having all this stuff, but hopefully that helps. Different way to read a textbook than you thought about? Yeah. My students go, oh, I read all this on developmental whatever. I'm like, well, that's all fine and good, except you see it anywhere on the syllabus. You see it on any study guide. Like, why would you do that? So what I tell my students with textbooks, read with purpose, right? Know what you're looking for in that textbook. Because, you don't have time to read every single word of every textbook that is assigned in all your classes, right? Especially if you're taking 15 minutes or something. So read with purpose, right? That syllabus should be guiding you. Study guides should be guiding you. Read with purpose. It's totally, I'm giving you permission to do that, right? All right.
Yeah, beyond it is all really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just do it.
All right, look at that. We got 10 minutes to spare. Right on. I guess you guys take a break, right? What happens at 3:30? You don't know.
No.
How long are you all here for this thing? Oh, do you have to wait?
Question.
I don't have to wait. I love you guys, but I don't have to wait.
Thank you, Dr. Barr.
You're welcome. I hope that helps you guys.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah, kind of quick, but-
So we just record that? Oh. Where?
So